Singapore says most migrant workers living in dormitories will be able to resume work by the end of the month. Authorities, they're on track to clear all the dormitories of the coronavirus by tomorrow. That's except for a final group of workers who are completing their quarantine. And at the same time, work from home requirements are under review following feedback from firms and employees. Even so, the government says the arrangements should continue as it helps to reduce congestion. And for a closer look, we're joined by Associate Professor Walter Theseira from the Singapore University of Social Sciences. Professor Theseira, as we've seen recently, it does seem like we're looking at a new wave of imported cases, and they could increase with a second green lane arrangement coming into play later this month. Should we be worried about the number of imported COVID-19 cases so far?
Well, the key is that the imported cases we do have, they've been identified by testing recent arrivals who are in stay-at-home facilities. So because of that, they are not a risk to the general community, even if the imported numbers do rise, as long as we maintain the separation between recent arrivals and our community, we can prevent transmission. But what it does show is that we have to continue with these strict measures for travelers to Singapore to mitigate the risk. It's worth noting that these green lane travel arrangements, they're not a license for free and easy travel. You have to get tested before and after arriving in Singapore. Your movements are controlled throughout. So there's a lot of risk management in place.
Most of these recent cases, Professor, have come from India, some as young as babies and toddlers. What do you think, or why do you think they've travelled here, and why have they been allowed into Singapore?
Well, I think in the first instance, if they have been allowed into Singapore, it's because they have a prior connection or reason to come to Singapore that places them in the approved list. So again, right now, we are at the point where we're pretty much only allowing people to travel to Singapore if they are already, for example, a pass holder of some type, or if they manage to obtain a pass. We're not allowing people to travel to Singapore for the most part for tourism or any other, any other reasons like that. And there is no green lane arrangement with India at the moment, so it's not a case of casual business travelers or anything like that at the moment. But I do think that the high prevalence, of imported cases from some countries just goes to show just how prevalent the epidemic is in those countries. And that's even more reason why we have to manage the risk very carefully at the moment.
All right, but is now the right time to even resume travel links with other countries? As we're talking, cases, they're still multiplying in places. We mentioned there, India, even Hong Kong, Japan, and Melbourne.
Well, at this stage, we are not actually resuming travel, for tourism or even business conferences and so on. The reason why we are trying to resume some travel is that we need to ensure Singapore remains a part of these global business networks. Companies don't invest in Singapore just for our domestic market. It's very small. They're coming to us because we are helping them to do business in the rest of ASEAN, the rest of the world. And so there are very serious consequences to Singapore if we remain shut off from the world for too long, more than just the impact to tourism. The real risk is that we're going to lose that place in the global business community, and that will have a very serious impact on our economy. So that's why we cannot remain closed off forever.
Yes, and we do understand that the decision to reopen the economy will ultimately rest on a risk-based assessment. What could some of these risks be for Singapore, and what are the benefits? It's going to be a tough one to balance out.
The obvious risk is that despite our best efforts, we have an imported case that slips past our detection and control protocols, and that starts a chain of transmission in the community. That's a real risk. There have been breaches of quarantine in New Zealand. They had to tighten procedures. There's some concern that the current outbreak in Hong Kong is actually due to imported cases going undetected. So there are real risks here, but there's also a benefit. And the benefit is that with a careful, calibrated opening, we remain useful and connected to the world. And that's because the trade and business links we already have with the world, they can't run on autopilot. there's a limit to how much business we can conduct remotely, especially if you're starting a new business. That kind of face-to-face personal connection is really important, and we need to stay relevant to the world by being open in a safe way.
All right, many thanks for your thoughts as always. Associate Professor Walter Theseira from the Singapore University of Social Sciences.